Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to another edition of Blind Banter. Tonight's topic is going to be guide dogs. I'm Lorne Neufeld, and I am here with my co-host.
Carlos Garcia, as always.
Hey, how are you doing tonight, Carlos?
Not too bad, thankfully, we're getting a little bit of an open here in Milwaukee, so I was hoping to be able to go out and go to the restaurants and go to the gym this week. So I'm excited.
Oh man, I am jealous. Here in Ottawa, we can't even go outside very very well, but just enough with social distancing and just the basic stores, with as long as it's got the doors that are facing outwards and outside, you can do it. But none of the massage therapists are open. None of the hairdressers are open. So unfortunately, we're still looking shaggy.
It's weird. We have massage therapists open here, which I thought was a little surprising. But anyways,
now you're just being a show off.
Yeah. So we can just get started about guide dogs. I think this is a topic that I really like to talk about because it's a really useful tool for blind people, but it can also be a tool that might not be for some people at certain stages of their life. And I think it's a really good topic to cover.
For sure. So I'll go first in regards to why I wanted one and what kind of got me going. So when I was 18, so about 12-ish years ago, I started losing the ability to read, and my eyesight just plummeted because I did have issues since I was about 6 months old. But due to macular degeneration mixed with retinitis pigmentosa, I saw a huge drop in my vision, and that's when they gave me the moniker being legally blind, which would here in Canada is 500 over 20, and that's when I started using a cane and learning kind of how to do that, and being stubborn and not taking my cane. And after a couple hits of signs and doors and going through a Blockbuster one time, I went to go to walk through the doorway, and of course it wasn't a doorway, it was a sheet of glass. So me being the fast walker that I am, ended up hitting it, splintered the entire thing. It just shattered, but at least it didn't break apart. And the manager comes running out and was yelling at me as I was pretending to tie my shoe like I tripped. And so after explaining it to her in her office, that was kind of like, oh, okay, well, sorry, you should maybe use a cane. So then I started using more of a cane, and a cane works really well for the most part, but you just don't get the same speed as you would with the dog. So I saw a few people, because I was working at the Canadian Council of the Blind at the time, and I noticed that a lot of people around me had dogs. So I started asking more and more people. And then I finally took the plunge to end up getting a dog after I spoke to my, then girlfriend, but now wife, Christy. And we thought, we might as well get a dog and see how much better it is for me. So I ended up going through the guide dogs for the blind out in Oregon. And it was absolutely life-changing. Got Novato, and was able to go a lot quicker around a lot of construction zones, going through the streets, those types of things. And it was nice to be able to kind of, I guess, give some of the responsibility off to him. And I remember going on our first walk going, how am I supposed to put my life in this dog's paws, I guess? And it didn't really make sense to me why I would let an animal take it in control. But to be honest with you, he probably has better judgment due to his eyesight than I do. So he stopped me in front of moving vehicles. He stopped me at all the lights and everything. So it was absolutely, I would almost say, magical for the first walk that we ever did. And then they blindfolded me completely because I had a little bit of sight, and they wanted me to go completely lights out, I guess. So it was very nerve-wracking to not have those senses, but just put everything in the harness, and it was absolutely incredible. And he worked well for me for about 2.5 years, and then due to him having some illness, he ended up, like, we were walking across I think it's a 17 or an 18 lane intersection, and he just stopped. He just stopped and laid down and wouldn't get up. And so we ended up having 11 cars one direction stopped. We had 14 cars the other one. They're yelling at me like, get your dog up. I'm going, well, if I could, I would. And so I pretty much picked him up, and we brought him to the sidewalk, tried to get him to work a little bit more, but he wouldn't. And then the moment I took his harness off, he was like, okay, yep, let's get going. So he really gave me that message loud and clear that he didn't want to work. And we tried working him on and off for the next couple of weeks, and it just didn't work. So we knew that he was done. And it was almost about a year and a half later, then I ended up going to the Seeing Eye and got Herbie, which is my current guide dog, and he's just like Novato is a black lab. And that's actually where I met Carlos here, and we had a fantastic time. It was out of the Seeing Eye out of New Jersey, and it was definitely a very opening experience, because it's a whole different animal. So he's got a completely different personality, and just being able to work with him and kind of seeing how the two schools kind of, I guess, differently train their dogs was very eye-opening for me. And he has an extremely different way of guiding, which is still really good, but he's more of a scrappier dog in regards to, he's not very delicate when he's going through crowds of people. He will just say, okay, we're picking a thing and we're going straight through. So he doesn't care if it's kids, he doesn't care if it's anybody. He's pulled me a few times where I've ran into like 2 or 3 6'5", 6'6" people that are just these burly men that are just walking, and he's like, no, I can make it. And then you bump into him going, oh, sorry, I didn't see you. And then they just look at you like, oh, you're just annoying me, because I'm only 5'7". So it definitely looks completely different, and it's just like, what are you doing? But he definitely has a less of a finesse to him, but it's absolutely incredible on having one and being able to train with them for the first time. And how was yours? How was your experience, Carlos?
Yeah, sorry, Lorne. We're talking about dogs and Fenway's, sniffing around doing things. But so I had a bit of a different experience. I've used a cane for almost my entire life, right? I've been blind since I was 2 years old, so I've used a cane. And ever since I can remember, I was just waiting for the moment when I could get a dog, because I'd seen other people here in Milwaukee working with dogs. And honestly, at first, when I was like 12 and 13, 14, the cool thing for me wasn't necessarily the guiding. It was just like, oh, I have a dog, right? Like that, the fact that I could take my dog everywhere, that I could do, pretty much a lot of things that most dog owners can't, that was exciting to me. But as I got older and I realized, when I started reading up on the Seeing Eye website and realized that it had a little bit more responsibility, right? That yes, you had a dog, but now you have to feed this dog. You have to clean up after it. But also it came with a lot of benefits, like you said, being able to go through crowds a lot more comfortably, go through construction sites a lot more comfortably. It really got me excited to go in and get my dog. And I was really apprehensive because, like you said, it's pretty strange to think that you're going to put your life in the paws of this dog. And to me, it was like, I can't trust this dog. Like, what's going on here, right? You want me to trust some animal that I don't even know? And I think that I got over that pretty quickly. Being able to see how comfortable Fenway was. I know that a few times I had to get reminded by my trainer to like, hey, follow your dog. Stop trying to guide your dog. Let the dog guide you. But it really came out to be a positive experience. And I can say that over the last 2 years, he's been a fantastic addition to my college life. I mean, going through the Penn campus, I can go through campus probably better than most blind sighted people can. I mean, it's really great. I think that's probably one of the biggest additions of it. Like when I had one of the trainers come down to Penn's campus, they told me, that he was very impressed with him because there were people on bikes, on their cell phones that were literally going straight for us, and Fenway would pull us out of the way. And there were other sighted people who were not moving out of the way. So I was really impressed with him on that, and it's really been a great experience, and I definitely don't regret getting a dog. That being said, I think that there are definitely pros and cons to having a dog. And I think that it really differs on which stage of life you're in. I think it's a little bit, I'll be honest, right? It's a little bit harder to get a dog when you're going to college. And especially the first year, like I had never left my hometown, at least significantly by myself, and traveled. And here I am in Philadelphia the first day, just having to figure out everything. It's definitely a really, really stressful experience, because not only are you learning to travel in a new city as a blind person, but you're also learning to work with this new dog who still doesn't necessarily respect you quite yet. So, there's definitely some better times, but I also think that if you're willing to put in the work, and if you think, that you can handle that stress, because especially in the beginning, and I think you can attest to this, Lorne, they're not perfect, right? You are going to have to put in a lot of extra work with them. And so it's frustrating, because sometimes you're like, I don't know if this is true for you, Lauren, but I can just imagine, especially having a dog that you had before, you're thinking like, man, my dog before this didn't do this, right? And for me, it was more like, why? I've heard that these dogs are supposed to be magical. Like, why can't it do this? Why does it have this trouble with the street crossings, And that, I think you have to get over that, because the dogs are really well trained, but they're also being introduced to a new person, and that plays a big role. I mean, maybe Lauren, you could talk a little bit about the pros and cons that you had knowing, having a dog beforehand, and did you experience kind of a little bit of that, like, man, this is ridiculous, my old dog could do this no problem?
Yeah. So again, the one thing about Novato I have to say is the finesse to him. He's definitely a very much of a gentleman in regards to, he's very quiet. He does at first try to get into a lot of the stuff, but over the years we've been really able to build that bond where if I call him, he comes right away. The obedience is great. So is Herbie, but I just find that Novato does things a little bit more graceful. Herbie is definitely by far a better worker. Novato was all about trying to sniff things and trying to get dog distracted quite immensely, actually. And Herbie is very, very different. So where I had to give Novato a lot of corrections, Herbie, if I give him a physical correction, he'll actually shut down and lay down on the ground. And I can't do that. He's, as I like to call him, my delicate little flower. So I can only use verbal commands and I guess verbal disobedience cues, and to try to get him to stop. And usually one or two times of using the term "pfui," which is like stop in German. Using that seems to usually correct him verbally, and it kind of gets him onto the right track. So that I kind of like about him. With Novato, they taught a little differently at the Guide Dogs for the Blind, where they wanted to give you very heavy treat rewards, and you'd be going down a block and say, let's, after 20 to 30 seconds, oh, good boy, you'd reach into your bag, pull out a piece of dog food, and give it to them. And they called that kibble rewards. But the downside with that is that you'd get halfway through a block, and if you didn't give it to them, they'd actually stop and go, okay, where's my food? So that really got annoying really quickly. Yeah, exactly. And then when you didn't give it to them, then it was very much of, oh, okay, I'm going to start acting up, and I'm going to show you exactly what you're missing when you don't feed me. So they pretty much hold you hostage, which is just absolutely unbelievable. But any guide dog owner will attest that if they're angry with you during, say, a rainstorm, they will walk you through a puddle, but they won't walk themselves through a puddle. Or they will cause disobedience, and they will walk you into a post. Yes. And there's been a few times where it's like, oh, okay, you hit me on the post, you stop, you give them the correction, you look at them, go, okay, I got it. And then after that, they're just perfect dogs, and they're getting you through all the obstacles. Is pretty much telling you, all right, got you, we're now equal, let's continue down the road. So for us to say something like that, it seems kind of overwhelming or almost fairy tale-ish. And if you talk to any guide dog user, they will tell you that that's exactly what happens. So just like humans, they definitely have their on days and their off days. They're not always going to be 100%. But that's why having that bond and building that rapport with them will help with obedience, as well as it'll help with just that working partnership to be able to get from point A to point B safer and quicker, and hopefully without as many treats.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Lauren, because it kind of pivots onto the next topic I want to talk about, which is kind of what you have to expect out of the dog, and then what you shouldn't expect out of the dog, right? So first of all, I think that the biggest difference between having a dog and a cane is that you have to build this bond, like you were saying, right? They will have their off days. They will have days where they're not acting right. Maybe it's for a medical reason. Maybe it's just because, they woke up on the wrong side of the crate or whatever. Regardless, they do have their off days, and maybe that's the day where you have this big interview and you have to, you have to really get there, and they're causing all these problems. True story. I'll talk about it some other day. But, and it really might make you irritated and go like, you were working fine perfectly yesterday. Why are you not doing this today when I really need you to? But that's one of the biggest differences, right? Is if you expect them to be perfect every day like a cane would, right? A cane doesn't differ. As long as you don't break it, it isn't going to cause any problems for you. And a dog might on one day or another for some reason that you have absolutely no idea about. And you really have to take the time to think about it and go, well, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Is it just a bad day and I have to learn to, work with them and accommodate that, and tomorrow it'll be all right. And if you don't feel like you can do that, then maybe, the cane would definitely be a better option, because there are definitely pros to the cane, right? You can just throw it in the corner and it won't complain. I mean, and you don't have to feed it. You don't have to spend extra money on food. You don't have to clean up after it. But for me, the dog is just that much better, because yes, I have to, clean up after it. Yes, I have to put up with bad days and all this stuff. But you also get a partnership with this dog. You get much more openness to going through crowds, and much more confidence, in my opinion, with construction and things like that. And it's just a different feeling. But I think you also have to deal with, I think one of the biggest differences as well is having to deal with people kind of watching you, right? Like people are going to say, oh, that's that guy with that dog, right? And little kids are going to go, Mommy, why is there a dog in the coffee shop, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, shh, Johnny, but Mommy, there's a dog here. Shh, Johnny, like, my dog is working on you. Why can't I touch it? And like, so
Yeah.
I think, if you're not going to be okay with that, like there are some people that I know who get very, very offended, and they're like, they should respect my dog. And I mean, these are little children in all cases, right? They're definitely people like 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, people who act like children who will do that. But you also have to deal with
Yeah.
children doing that. And then Lauren, I'm sure you can talk a little bit more about that, Lauren. Like you've probably had your fair share of experience when people touch your dog, or, little kids want to come up and mess with you for your dog.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've had a lot of kids now. Most of the smaller kids will literally just run up and start trying to pet them. And both my dogs, I've been very lucky, have been very good with children. But one of the most annoying things I have to admit is the parents. I know I shouldn't touch them, but
Yeah.
it's like, okay, there is no but. I know you want to. If you ask and I don't actually have to go somewhere, I probably will allow you to pet the dog with your kid, no problems. But when you start going, I know I shouldn't touch them, but you're right, so don't. So it's just come out and ask me. But especially seeing like parents, as well as it seems to be very much the older generation as well as the younger generation. They both think it's absolutely incredible to see a dog, I guess, in public.
Yeah.
In a coffee shop that's not inside of a purse. But which no matter where you go nowadays, it seems to always happen. But having that type of dog in there in harness, and a lot of the time, if you're going to a big interview and you have a lot of anxiety, for example, the dog may not be your perfect bet that day, because the thing is no matter how much you try, your energy will flow through that harness. And if you get extremely anxious about something, or you get extremely confused, your dog is going to get the same way, because he or she is going to say, okay, well, what do you want me to do? I know I'm supposed to do this, but you don't have the same confidence. So am I doing something wrong? And then it'll start second guessing itself. So that's why it's definitely very important that you kind of figure out what type of day you're having, and seeing what type of, if it's more of a dog day per se, or a cane day. And if you do have a lot of anxiety, make sure you talk with the school that you're planning on going with and say, I have a lot more anxiety than, than the average person. So I need a more, I guess, stoic,
strong dog. Yeah.
yeah, a very stoic type dog to be able to overcome that and take me from point A to point B without second guessing. And that's really important, is to talk to the school and find out the school that you want to go to, however, like whichever one meets your criteria, because some will do certain breeds, others won't, and others are well, obviously in different locales. So kind of take all of that into consideration and just look at also, um, I guess, the quality of training or the type of training that you want to do.
Yes.
Some schools will use like a martingale collar where it's just more of the sound that will kind of, I guess, give them the correction. But another thing is going into a coffee shop, for example, and say your dog lunges for a piece of food for whatever reason, or it just does something and you have to give it a correction. With some schools, they use the training collars, or as some people call them, like the choke collars. So you're trying to give a correction, and you're supposed to do it pretty much as hard as you can to be able to give that quick, really quick jerk and release. You're not going to choke the dog, but you're just snapping them to attention. And for, like, say, children or for the general public, that can be something that's really scary to them because it looks like they're being abused. And that's one thing that I definitely do want to get across, is it's not abuse to the dog, because if you think about it this way, if you just take something and you put it against a muscle, eventually you're going to build and build and build the strength of that muscle. And then you're going to have to really ream hard to be able to do that. But if you nip it at the bud now, then you can train them not to do that. And in the future, there's a very good chance, as long as you keep it up, is that you won't ever have to do that again, say after the first 4 months, after the first 6 months, because they're going to know exactly how to function, or how you want them to function. And it's all about going with the ongoing training and the relationship between the two of you.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you mentioned about like training collars and different techniques, because I think as a dog owner, you also have to spend a little bit of time educating the general public about what you are and aren't doing. That's a big difference with the cane too, right? No one's ever going to say like, you're smacking your cane against that wall too hard. Like and you won't have as many criticisms of you as a person when you're carrying a cane as when you have a dog, right? If you do something, I know that recently I heard that some lady called up, I bet her name's Karen. She called up the seeing eye to tell them that the dog wasn't properly social distancing the handler, and that she thought that the handler was doing it on purpose, because obviously, these dogs are very well trained. And they had to explain to this Karen that the dog is not trained for these types of situations, and that the person is blind, so they very likely couldn't even see her. So there's no way that the person would have told her dog like, hey, go see if you can get close to this lady. So
Yeah.
you might, and in a lot of cases they'll call, and you might have to deal with, the trainers are nice, they're not going to call you up and be like, we heard that you're telling your dog to go up to Karen, but in some cases they might actually confront you and be like, that is not nice, you're doing this X, Y, and Z with your dog. And you have to explain to them calmly that you're not doing that. And you got to make sure that you're not getting rattled. I know some friends of mine who get very upset, and they're like, you're questioning me as a person. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, this random lady on the street thinks that you're a terrible person, like, for something that is clearly not terrible, I wouldn't worry about it, right? But if you are that type of person who might get concerned about it, then definitely take that into consideration, because the cane doesn't really elicit those same reactions as the dog would. So Lorne, I mean, we could talk a little bit about, we've been talking a lot about working, but how are you keeping your dogs entertained? I know personally here, I do a lot of sprinting, back and forth with him, catching toys. What do you find that you have to do?
So I'm in a very lucky I guess, situation, because I have two dogs in the house right now, so they kind of play with each other a lot. But I do take Herbie out for walks, both in harness and out of harness, as well as Novato, and we will go across, across our subdivision, or around wherever, going up to grab a coffee, which is about 15 minutes away each way. So doing those types of things, it works really well because it gets me out of the house, it gets them out of the house, and it also helps, well, our newborn kind of stop crying for a lot of the time. So it works really well for us to be able to do that. But we also have well, not a large backyard, but enough that they can kind of go around and blow some steam off, or go sit on the patio stones and enjoy the heat. So just keeping them active and keeping them busy for the most part will usually cause you less hassles. But I have definitely found out that they've been a lot more needy, so they're always following, well, it seems to be Christy these days, up and down the stairs and into Sky's room, and vice versa. So even though we're working Herbie quite frequently, it's not the same and not the amount that he's used to. So you definitely do see a decrease in, I guess, happiness per se. So he's nowhere near as, I wouldn't say tame, but I guess chill and relaxed as he normally would be.
Yeah, I think you got to remember that these dogs are working dogs, and they're not happy fully if they're not working. And so you definitely do, at least for my dog, I see a lot more anxiety. He's, like you said, following around a lot more. He's getting into a little bit more trouble. And I think that now that things are reopening and we're actually going out and doing a little bit more, hopefully we're going to be able to hit the gym next week. I think that should hopefully alleviate a lot of that anxiety that he might feel, because it's a massive difference, for a dog like him we were walking 5-6 miles a day through these massive hordes of college students that he had to avoid. And, he had so much mental stimulation from 5 a.m. in the morning to, 10, 11 p.m. at night. You can't really recreate that no matter what you try when you're doing, when you're socially distancing and you're shut down for the pandemic. So, trying to keep him occupied by just sprinting. If you don't have as big of a yard, maybe doing a lot more indoor games. One of the best games that I like to play with him, if you have a big straight set of stairs, just literally throw the toy up the stairs and they'll just run up and down the stairs. That really gets them a little bit more exhausted in a shorter time, and they love it. Or just do, some dogs like to wrestle. My dog doesn't like to wrestle, but if your dog does, I think that might be a thing as well. And definitely if you have another dog like Lorne does, yeah, it's a really lucky situation because they get their own exercise from just messing around with each other.
Yeah, if you don't have another dog, or you don't really have a yard, one thing that actually may work, depending on the locale that you live in. Like if you're in the U.S., you can talk to the American Kennel Club, or even here the Canadian Kennel Club, or even your local dog groups. You can find them on Facebook. There's tons of groups on them online. You can do it, and they're usually owners of the fenced-in dog parks are usually on there, or else it may be run by your city. And especially with this whole COVID thing, a lot of them are closed. But if you make if you make the question to them, a lot of the time I've been hearing that they will allow guide dogs and service dogs to be able to utilize that, because there's going to be no one else in there. So it's just going to be you and the dog, and you're going to be in an entirely fenced in area. So they'll allow you, once or twice a week, to be able to come in and kind of have your dog off leash or on a flexi leash if you want to do that way, depending on the obedience training that you're working with. And it will be able to kind of blow some steam off for both him and him and slash her and yourself. And it may be extremely beneficial that way. All you have to do is just ask, and the worst they can say is no. But I've heard from a lot of people that they're actually saying yes.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Lauren, especially if you're living in a big city where, you might have a studio apartment type thing. It's definitely a little bit harder to get exercise for your dog if you have no yard and you can't walk around and you've got Karen complaining about social distancing. So.
Well, I wanted to Unfortunately, we are out of time again, which, 30 minutes seems to go by really quickly,
It
especially when you're
does.
talking about, you know, actual
Fun
meaningful
stuff.
stuff. Yeah, exactly. So I want to thank Carlos, and I want to thank all of you guys for tuning in. You can reach us at blindbanter@gmail.com, at the Blind Banter for Twitter, as well as we're on Facebook, Blind Banter, and on Instagram at The Real Blind Banter. So until next time, thank you very much and stay safe.